The clock read 3:17 a.m. The penthouse was silent, but silence in this building was a weapon. It allowed every creak, every whisper of the city below to be amplified. Vincent Moretta's hand hovered over his phone, eyes bloodshot, pulse a drumbeat he couldn't quiet. His insomnia wasn't laziness, it was instinct. Danger never slept, and neither did he. The skyline glimmered through floor-to-ceiling windows, Baltimore to the north, Boston to the northeast. Maryland and Massachusetts. 2 states he controlled more tightly than some men controlled their own hearts. A glance to the city below reminded him that his reach extended past these, into New Jersey offices buzzing with accountants and analysts, California tech fronts head quietly acquired, even a discreet Hawaiian property he used as a retreat when paranoia became unbearable. Money was power, geography was leverage. He lit a cigarette, inhaled deep, and then crushed it under a heel of an Armani loafer. The ashtray had never caught fire before. Tonight it might. Security breach. The words came as text, 3 small letters, but they slammed into him like a gunshot. Vincent's jaw clenched. He didn't flinch. Not physically. But the room tightened around him. The Egyptian cotton sheets of his king-sized bed felt abrasive, the cold marble underfoot suddenly sharper. Someone had entered his building. Someone shouldn't be here. His phone buzzed again, a photo. Blurred, hurried. Someone had slipped past perimeter cameras. Not the first time, had expected this, but seeing it, frozen in pixels, ignited a cold fire in his chest. Vincent moved fast. Rolex glinting in the dim light, he swept the room with a trained eye. Every shadow, every reflection in the polished surfaces was a potential threat. A lifetime of contracts, alliances, betrayals had taught him to trust only one thing: fear itself. The penthouse was fortified like a vault. Bulletproof glass, biometric locks, silent alarms that whispered to his private team in New Jersey, Massachusetts, even California. Yet, the text told him something he couldn't ignore: vulnerability. He threw open the terrace doors. The city sprawled below, lights like fireflies trapped in glass jars. The Maryland harbor reflected the orange glow of street lamps, and somewhere in Boston, a surveillance drone hummed over his industrial holdings. Too far to matter tonight. The threat was here now. Vincent's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "I know you're awake." A voice, smooth, unervingly familiar. "And I know what you left behind." The words were casual, almost conversational. But Vincent's stomach dropped. Only one person could speak like that, weaving threat with intimacy. Someone from the past Head believed extinguished. Who the hell is this? His tone was calm, surgical. But inside, his blood throbbed, echoing every hallway Head walked alone in Maryland, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. "Your daughter." The word sliced the room. Vincent froze. The world narrowed to a single point. The name of the child Head never meant to leave in the dark. Had been meticulous, ruthless. He never made mistakes. But one misstep, one miscalculation, and the life he thought controlled could unravel in an instant. He moved to the bar, poured himself a glass of rare scotch, Macallan, aged 25 years. He drank, letting the warmth spread, counting the milliseconds before his body betrayed panic. Another text, "We see everything." A photograph followed. It showed her, the former lover. The woman had left, raising something he didn't know existed. A baby. His baby. The floor beneath him seemed to shift. 6 months of absence, gone in one image. Head left to protect, he told himself. Protect from enemies in California, from power plays in New Jersey, from betrayal in Hawaii. Protect from himself. And yet, here she was. Alive. Thriving. Angry. Waiting. Vincent's chest tightened. The absolute power he wielded across Maryland, Massachusetts, and beyond suddenly felt irrelevant. He couldn't buy this moment. He couldn't negotiate it. He had failed the one person he swore He'd never fail. He turned toward the phone again. His finger hovered over a call button. One ring would trigger a chain reaction: lawyers, security, assassins in New Jersey and California ready to move, drones in Hawaii watching. All the machinery He'd built would engage. But he paused. The mother, his former lover, was not a problem to solve with power. She was a puzzle, a mirror of every choice head buried under empire and money. A knock at the terrace door startled him. He was alone. Always alone. He moved to the door, Rolex catching the faint city light. A shadow flickered outside. Vincent's hand brushed the gun in his side holster. Instincts screamed. Every inch of him remembered violence like breathing. The shadow paused. The world slowed, heartbeat loud in his ears. And then she stepped into the moonlight. Not armed. Not afraid. Angry. Beautiful. The calm before chaos. You left. Her voice was soft but lethal. You left us. Vincent swallowed. Words, polished and precise, refused to form. The power he commanded over continents, corporate empires, and territories in Maryland and Massachusetts meant nothing here. He was a man exposed. Naked in truth. I thought I was protecting you. His voice, usually controlled, broke. A crack in the armor he didn't know he had. Protecting us? She stepped closer. Her eyes burned with questions he couldn't answer. Or protecting yourself. The city didn't exist anymore. Maryland's lights, Massachusetts skyline, even the faint glow of California coastlines seemed like background noise to the gravity of this moment. Time slowed. Everything in Vincent's life led here, power, wealth, fear, but nothing prepared him for her presence. A siren wailed in the distance, but he didn't notice. The penthouse, the glass, the silk sheets, the polished marble, they were props in a life that now felt hollow. He realized the first crack wasn't the threat outside. It wasn't the security breach. It wasn't even the shadow in the moonlight. It was him. The man who controlled wealth across Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, California, and Hawaii. The man who had never failed. The man who was about to face a reckoning more absolute than any rival, any enemy, any empire. Because for the first time, power couldn't solve the problem. And the story had just begun. Vincent barely remembered how he got to the cafe on the corner of Massachusetts Avenue. The streets outside Boston blurred past like a watercolor smeared with rain. He had left his penthouse in a haze, mind spiraling, every instinct screaming that something had changed. The shadows of his empire, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, California, Hawaii, had never felt smaller, more irrelevant. Only one person mattered. He saw her before she noticed him. Sitting at a small wooden table by the window, sunlight hitting her hair like gold filigree, she looked impossibly composed. Impossible because he had believed she was gone. Impossible because she was not alone. A child perched on the edge of the chair beside her, tiny legs swinging, hair dark as her mother's. Another smaller one rested against her shoulder, half asleep, blanket bunched around them. Both were impossibly quiet. Innocence in motion, unaware of the storm that had always lurked around their mother. The timeline clicked in his mind like a metronome. 14 months ago, he had left, telling himself it was for their safety. 12 months ago, she had discovered she was pregnant. He had never known. 11 months ago, she tried contacting him. Blocked. Cut off. 7 months ago, she gave birth. Complications. He remembered from a private medical report he had pulled weeks ago, just in case. 6 months ago, medical crisis. ICU stay. The timeline was cruel in its precision. He had been absent for every heartbeat, every breath, every tiny milestone. And here they were. Alive. Thriving. Not a single trace of the chaos he had tried to control had left her broken. Vincent's hand trembled around the coffee cup. He hadn't touched caffeine yet, only adrenaline and panic coursing through veins used to managing empires and assassins. The child shifted, a small yawn stretching across their tiny face. One of them had his nose, the bridge sharp, the tiny jaw square. He cursed the genetics he had thought he left behind. Mommy. The younger child's voice, faint but deliberate, tugged at something Vincent had forgotten existed. The word held no weight beyond its simplicity, but it struck him with a force stronger than any deal, any threat, any gun he had faced. He leaned back against the wall, hiding in plain sight, counting the seconds as if timing could fix what he had broken. She had built a life he had no access to, and yet, the evidence was right here. 2 children, ages 1 and 3, alive, well-fed, clothed, loved, proof of everything he had failed to witness. She noticed him next. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't fear. It was calculating. The way a chess master studies an unexpected move. Her eyes locked on him, narrowing. Vincent felt every muscle in his body stiffen. The absolute power he wielded in New Jersey, Maryland, Massachusetts, California, Hawaii, the control over finances, contracts, even life itself, worthless against the gravity of her stare. He wanted to speak, to say something decisive, but the words choked in his throat. All he could manage was a single nod, a fractured acknowledgement that he had been caught. Vincent. Her voice was measured, ice and warmth intertwined. The syllable hit his ears like a verdict. Emma. He had called her by her first name for the first time in over a year. The sound of it made the room feel smaller, tighter, suffocating. Her children shifted. The older one blinked up at him, curiosity raw and unfiltered. Vincent's chest tightened again. He didn't know the first thing about interacting with them. He had studied charts, handled bullet trajectories, negotiated billion-dollar contracts, but not this. Not this human, fragile, living evidence of everything he had abandoned. Emma's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't move. She didn't reach for him. That was the first line drawn. Boundaries. She was alive, they were alive, and yet she refused to let him back in without earning it. Vincent exhaled slowly. He had missed the timeline of life unfolding in increments too small to notice from a distance. Every month, every milestone, every first word, every scraped knee he hadn't kissed. It all compounded into a tidal wave that now threatened to pull him under. The younger child let out a soft cry, rubbing their eyes. Emma instinctively scooped them up, humming a lullaby he hadn't heard since. He couldn't remember. He remembered nothing about this moment, and yet he remembered everything. Each detail of her face, the way she moved, the little quirks, the tilt of her head, the way she tucked hair behind her ear when tense, the hardened gentleness that had always drawn him in, now became anchors, pointing to everything he had lost and everything he had to reclaim. Are these mine? His words trembled, tentative. A man who had commanded armies of accountants, mercenaries, and executives couldn't control the quiver in his voice. Emma's eyes flickered. Anger? Relief? Confusion? He couldn't tell. She tilted her head, one eyebrow arched, holding the silence like a weapon. They are. Her single word landed heavier than any debt, any contract, any ultimatum he had ever delivered. Vincent swallowed. He tried to focus, tried to act like the man who had power over states, companies, people, but the reality of the children in front of him pulled at every corner of his intellect and strategy. He was unarmed, powerless. All he could do was see them, and see the damage his absence had wrought. Time moved differently now. The cafe hum became a soundtrack to a slow-motion reckoning. The baby yawned, the toddler played with a spoon, completely unaware of the storm that had just entered their world. Vincent's mind ticked off every detail of months lost, nights unshared, first steps and first words that he had never witnessed. The timeline wasn't just math. It was a ledger of failure, and he had signed every page. He wanted to reach for them, to touch them, to make up for a lifetime of absence in one gesture. But Emma moved, sliding her hand subtly between him and the children. The gesture wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, but it was enough. Boundaries. Respect. Distance. Vincent recognized the genius in the move. She didn't need words. Every detail of her presence told him she had survived without him. She had thrived without him. And yet, she had lived with him in her mind, because these children, his children, were living testaments to what they had once shared. The cafe door opened. A waiter placed coffee in front of her, perfectly timed, but Vincent didn't notice. All he noticed was the precision of her life, her ability to manage chaos with a grace he had never seen in boardrooms or back alleys. She was in control, and he was the intruder. He noticed the children again. Their tiny hands, the faint freckles along the bridge of their noses, the way the older one mimicked Emma's every movement. Every gesture was evidence. Evidence that he had been gone for too long. Evidence that he had missed more than he could count. He wanted to ask questions, but the first words that came out weren't questions. they were confessions. I didn't know. The phrase sounded weak, absurd. For a man who controlled empires, who had assassins on speed dial, who had never hesitated to execute impossible strategies, admitting ignorance was a foreign language. Emma's eyes softened, just a fraction. A crack. Perhaps hope. Perhaps calculation. Vincent didn't dare assume either. The older child spoke first, innocently. Daddy? The words split him in half. Every wall of composure he had erected across Massachusetts, Maryland, New Jersey, California, and Hawaii collapsed into rubble. He froze. Breath caught. Heart stuttered. He didn't know what to do. He had never learned to navigate this battlefield of small hands and innocent eyes. Daddy, the child repeated, a little louder this time, cheeks flushed with excitement and expectation. Vincent wanted to run. He wanted to stay. He wanted to disappear and fix everything all at once. None of it made sense. Time had passed, milestones had been reached, and he had not been there. And yet, here, in this cafe, seconds stretched into eternities. Emma didn't intervene. Not yet. She let the moment hang, let him grapple with the consequences of absence. Let him face the timeline he had ignored. Vincent's hands shook as he reached forward, slowly, cautiously. The toddler shrank a little, instinctively seeking Emma's protection. The older child held still, curiosity outweighing fear. Vincent's fingers brushed the small hand that was half his, half hers. The shock, the recognition, the guilt, the wonder. They all collided in one jagged moment. He could see the passage of 14 months etched in their small features, each one a reminder of his failures and a roadmap for redemption he hadn't earned yet. He closed his eyes for a moment, tasting the tang of coffee, the faint scent of baby lotion, the sun on his face. The world had shifted on its axis, and he had no choice but to follow. Emma spoke finally, her voice quiet, deliberate. They're yours, Vincent. But don't think that means anything yet. The words struck harder than any threat. A challenge. A boundary. A mirror. Vincent opened his eyes. The timeline was no longer abstract. The children were real. The consequences of absence were tangible. And the weight of it pressed down on him like gravity. For the first time in his life, across Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, California, and Hawaii, he understood, power was irrelevant here. Control was an illusion. Only presence mattered. And he had missed too much. The older child looked up again, eyes wide. Daddy? Vincent swallowed, voice thick, nearly breaking. Yes. Here. Here. The emotional punch hit him like a tidal wave. Recognition wasn't just seeing, they existed because of him, yet despite him. And he had no right to claim them yet. The reckoning had begun. Episode 2. The conference room in his Boston office was pristine. Venetian blinds slanted the morning light across the polished oak table, cutting across leather chairs like the bars of a cage. Vincent leaned back in his chair, hands drumming an irregular pattern, mind rehearsing strategies he had never needed to use with her before. Power was his currency. Authority, his language. But she, Emma, spoke in something far more terrifying, truth. He hadn't planned this. A chance meeting at a cafe had thrown everything off schedule. He had expected resistance, perhaps distance, maybe even a polite dismissal. But the children, his children, had made it impossible to retreat. Now she was standing at the threshold of his office, uninvited, eyes flashing, arms crossed. Vincent, she said, each syllable crisp, precise, like a scalpel through muscle. We need to talk. He wanted to close the blinds, call security, issue ultimatums. But the sight of the children, the timeline replaying in his head, kept him rooted. He didn't say anything immediately, letting the weight of silence stretch, letting her frustration build. He knew this game, he had always known it. But here, in this room, the rules were different. She set them. I saw them, he said finally. The words were raw. No pouliść. Nos chill. All of them. Her lip curled slightly. Of course you did. You were invisible for 14 months. But somehow, you think seeing them once erases everything? He swallowed hard. That one sentence carried the force of years. Of nights he had spent alone, power humming through his veins but failing to fill the empty space where they should have been. You don't understand. He started, but the words failed him. Powerless. Vulnerable. Not an emperor now, not a man in control, but a man exposed. She took a step closer, ignoring his chair, ignoring the office entirely. Understand? You left. I raised them alone. I fought to keep them alive. And now you just appear, expecting what? Apology? Gratitude? Her voice rose, echoing against the walls but controlled, precise. Rage refined into articulation. Vincent's jaw clenched. He had faced assassins, rivals, federal investigations, but nothing like this. A lifetime of commanding respect meant nothing when confronted with justified anger. No, you don't get to speak yet. She cut him off, the way she always could. The children had taught her subtler weapons, patience, observation, restraint, but now, unleashed, the force was relentless. Do you have any idea what it's like to go to the hospital alone at 3 a.m, praying that a tiny life doesn't slip through your fingers because the father you thought would protect them? Isn't there? Vincent's chest tightened. A faint taste of copper. His hands trembled, a subtle quiver that betrayed him. He had orchestrated billion-dollar deals, manipulated outcomes across 5 states, New Jersey, Maryland, Massachusetts, California, Hawaii, but he could not negotiate forgiveness. Not here. Not now. I thought I was protecting you, he managed finally, voice cracking on the last word. I thought if I left, I'd. You thought, she repeated, cutting through the air like a blade. You thought. You didn't do. You never did. You left. You abandoned us. And for what? Some delusion of safety? Some empire that doesn't matter when your family is in front of you? He flinched. Every accusation landed like a bullet. And she didn't stop. Her fists didn't pound tables. They didn't need to. Her words carried the weight of months of solitude, nights awake, the soft whimpers of children she had raised alone. You think a single coffee meeting fixes anything? She continued, voice rising but measured. That a glance, a sorry, erases 14 months of missed milestones, of scraped knees kissed by me alone, of hospitals navigated by one pair of hands? The office was silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the faint tapping of his fingers against the chair's armrest. But the silence wasn't calm. It was loaded. Dangerous. Heavy. Charged. Vincent's instincts screamed at him to assert control. To remind her, and himself, of the power he still commanded. But every instinct failed when faced with the raw reality before him. Emma was unyielding. She wasn't angry in the petty sense. She was furious, justified, immovable. The power imbalance shifted. He was no longer the master. Here, he was beneath. He exhaled sharply. I know I don't deserve it, he said, each word deliberate. I know. Nothing I do will make this right immediately. But I'm here now. I want to. Stop, she snapped, eyes narrowing. The word didn't echo. It cut. Don't want anything. You don't get to want. You lost the right to want 14 months ago. Her voice cracked, a sliver of vulnerability showing. He noticed it immediately. The danger wasn't just anger, it was raw honesty. A vulnerability she kept tightly hidden, until now. And he couldn't exploit it. Not yet. He could only witness it. I'll do whatever it takes, he whispered. Not bold. Not commanding. Not a declaration. A plea. Emma's laugh was short, bitter. Whatever it takes. That phrase has never been yours to say. She gestured toward the children, sitting quietly in the corner of the office, eyes wide, absorbing the tension. You think paying debts, showing up, claiming presence fixes anything? They're not yours yet. Not fully. Not until you've proven day after day that leaving was a mistake, not a strategy. Vincent's throat closed. The scale of his failure stretched out in front of him. Every empire he controlled, every weapon, every ally, worthless in the face of parenting and presence. She moved closer, the gap between them charged with tension. I don't care about your money, your influence, your security. I care about the children, and myself. And if you can't meet that standard, then leave. Right now. I will not be manipulated, convinced, or bought. I am not your property. They are not your trophies. He blinked. The words settled like stones in his stomach. Property. Trophies. He realized painfully that he had never treated them as anything else before. Everything had been a transaction. Every moment he missed, every step, every hospital visit. But now the ledger was clear. He was accountable in real time, and the consequences were immediate. Emma exhaled slowly. The fire in her eyes softened slightly, but the edge remained. Boundaries drawn with surgical precision. She gestured toward the door. I will not let you back in by showing up and saying the right words. You will earn every step. And if you can't, you will leave. He nodded, swallowing hard. I will. Her eyes flicked to him, piercing, assessing. Do you even understand what that means? I do, he said. And for the first time, he wasn't bluffing. He could not command his way through this. He could not manipulate. He could only endure. Only work. Only prove himself through presence, humility, and persistence. Then we begin, she said, turning to her children. They moved toward her instinctively, little hands reaching for protection, for guidance. Vincent watched, silently, realizing that he had never truly understood power until now. It wasn't wealth. It wasn't fear. It wasn't dominance. It was responsibility. The ability to stand, day after day, without shortcuts, without leverage, and simply be there for the people who needed him most. The weight of the lesson settled into his bones. The office, once a symbol of his empire, now felt like a crucible. Every chair, every polished surface reflected the truth. He was no longer invincible. He was accountable. Vulnerable. A man who had to rebuild, not conquer. Emma's gaze softened, just slightly, but he didn't mistake it for forgiveness. Not yet. It was the faintest acknowledgement that he had begun to understand. That he was capable of beginning. The children looked at him again, innocent, unknowing. The oldest one's hand twitched toward him, half in curiosity, half in tentative trust. Vincent's voice cracked as he spoke. I will wait. I'll do everything every day, for as long as it takes. Emma didn't respond immediately. She only watched, sharp, measured, silent. Boundaries intact. Rage tempered with calculation. She would see if he meant it. See if he could endure. See if he could transform. And Vincent understood that this was only the beginning. Vincent had never imagined that doing laundry could feel like a battlefield. He stared at the stack of infant clothes on the kitchen counter, their tiny fabrics folded with precision by hands that knew care in ways his never had. Armani suits never needed gentleness. Rolls-Royce interiors never required patient scrubbing. Yet here he was, trembling fingers fumbling over a baby onesie, trying to separate whites from colors without turning the pile into a catastrophe. Emma watched from the doorway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. She didn't intervene. She knew this would be humbling. She had to see him falter before he could truly begin to understand. You have to pre-treat the stains first, she said finally, voice calm but laced with authority. And the detergent. Use this one. Not that. Whatever you grabbed. Vincent's jaw clenched. I know. His voice was flat, but his hands betrayed him, fumbling with the little bottle. He had managed multi-million-dollar mergers, negotiated with heads of state, controlled power brokers in 5 of the richest states in the country. New Jersey, Maryland, Massachusetts, California, Hawaii, but he could not navigate laundry without guidance. A sock slipped from his fingers and landed on the floor. He bent down quickly to retrieve it, narrowly avoiding stepping on a spilled bottle of detergent. The faint scent of citrus and chemicals stung his nose, and he coughed. Emma's eyes glimmered with restrained amusement, but no words came. This is harder than I thought, he muttered, fumbling. Of course it is, she replied evenly. It's called life when you're actually responsible. Not commanding an empire. Not making someone fear you. Just being present. He froze, absorbing her words. Presence. That simple, terrifying concept. It was harder than any negotiation, more demanding than any battlefield. Yet she was right. He had never been required to exist solely for others, to endure repetition, to measure success by patience rather than profit. Breakfast was a disaster. He tried to make formula, overfilled the bottle, spilling powdered milk onto the counter, then dropped the spoon into the sink, creating a mess that splashed the tiled floor. Emma leaned against the doorway, silent judgment etched into her posture. He tried to make conversation, to bridge the tension. "Do they remember me?" he asked quietly, staring at the children, who watched him with a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. "They're cautious," Emma said. "And they should be. You weren't here for 14 months. That's a long time to be invisible. They've learned to survive without you." Vincent's throat tightened. He had thought his absence would be a temporary inconvenience, a minor sacrifice. But seeing their guarded eyes, hearing the calculated neutrality in Emma's voice, he understood for the first time the weight of what he had done. Diaper changes were worse. One baby screamed relentlessly, small fists punching the air, while Vincent tried to secure the diaper without success. He fumbled with wipes, fumbling with tabs, fumbling with fasteners, each failure echoing in the apartment like a gavel. Emma hovered, offering occasional corrections, each word a dagger of silent judgment. "You have to snap the tabs fully," she instructed, voice clipped. "Not halfway. They'll leak." I didn't realize," he said, voice cracking. I've never." "You've never been a parent in real time," she said, finishing his thought for him. "This isn't a boardroom. This isn't a deal. You don't win by strategy. You lose if you fail to follow instructions." The humiliation was sharp. He felt his chest tighten, hands trembling. Luxury, power, influence. Nothing prepared him for the raw, immediate, relentless responsibility of domestic life. Armani cufflinks did not help with spit-up. Rolls-Royce leather was irrelevant when navigating a high chair. His empire had no application here. He tried to make breakfast again, this time for the older child. Scrambled eggs overcooked, toast burned, juice spilled on the pristine white countertop. Emma sighed softly. "Stop apologizing. Just observe, learn, follow." Vincent nodded. Humility was an unfamiliar sensation. He had never admitted weakness so completely. Not in business, not in conflict, not in power. But here, weakness was unavoidable. Presence demanded it. Effort required it. Survival of this domestic ecosystem depended on it. The apartment itself was a contrast to his life of luxury. Emma had furnished it modestly, functional but not ostentatious. A second-hand crib, chipped kitchen counters, worn but clean floors. The subtle scent of laundry soap, of formula, of children's skin, replaced the usual scent of leather, cologne, and expensive cedar. The juxtaposition made every failure more acute, every fumble a reminder that he was out of his element. Nap time offered no relief. The children slept, but Vincent's anxiety did not. He watched them, heart thundering, memories flashing of absences, of opportunities lost, of nights where he had been too occupied with power to notice a scraped knee, a fever, a frightened cry. He pressed his fingers to the crib rails, inhaling the faint baby-scented air, and felt the rawest kind of guilt, unadulterated, unavoidable, heavy. Emma watched him silently. She didn't intervene. She had learned long ago that actions carried more weight than words. He needed to absorb the shame, to feel the consequences of absence, before he could begin to understand presence. The afternoons were filled with minor catastrophes. Laundry folded incorrectly, formula spilled again, toys misplaced, bottles lost in the abyss of the sofa cushions. Each mistake layered humiliation upon him, yet Emma remained steady. Her glance was constant, unwavering. Boundaries intact. She would not rescue him, not fully. Not yet. He had to earn it, moment by moment, failure by failure. Dinner was another test. Vincent attempted a simple pasta dish. Salt was overused. Garlic burned. Olive oil spilled across the counter. He tasted a bite and gagged, trying to hide it as the children stared. Emma didn't smile, didn't scold. She only moved quietly to adjust the sauce, silent but exacting, demonstrating through action what he could not yet achieve through trial alone. By nightfall, Vincent sat exhausted, shoulders slumped, hands stained with pasta and formula. He had never known a day so long, a series of minutes so unrelenting. Luxury, power, influence, gone, meaningless. In their place, small victories, incremental steps, humility extracted in real time. Are you always this, incapable? Emma asked softly, almost pitying, though the edge of her anger remained. He looked up, silent for a moment. I'm trying. The words felt hollow, insufficient, but they were all he had. That's not enough, she said, matter of fact. Not yet. But it's a start. The children drifted off to sleep. Vincent sat alone in the dim light, contemplating the distance between him and the life he had abandoned. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the heater, the soft creak of floorboards, the occasional rustle of blankets. Each sound was magnified in his consciousness, a reminder that he could not hide. He could not delegate. He could only exist, fail, learn, repeat. He pressed his hands against his face. The rawness of humility settled into him, a deep ache that had nothing to do with muscle or sleep, and everything to do with conscience. His empire across New Jersey, Maryland, Massachusetts, California, and Hawaii was vast. But here, in this modest apartment, with this family he had almost lost, power was irrelevant. Only presence mattered. Only effort. Only endurance. Emma appeared briefly at the doorway, silently observing him. No words. Just a glance. Boundaries intact. Expectations clear. She had survived alone, now he had to survive with her. Not in front of witnesses, not in a controlled environment, not under observation, but in the crucible of everyday life. By the end of the week, Vincent could manage simple tasks: a bottle without spilling, a diaper changed without a flood, a toy organized without chaos. Progress was incremental, painstaking, humbling. Each small victory came with the bitter reminder of past absences, of lost moments, of mistakes unredeemed. Yet for the first time, he understood that power was not dominance. Power was presence. Influence was not control. Influence was care. And he had begun, awkwardly, imperfectly, to wield both where it truly mattered. He collapsed into bed that night, utterly exhausted, the scent of detergent, formula, and baby powder clinging to his clothes. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams of missed birthdays, of hospital nights alone, of cries he hadn't answered. But he slept with one crucial understanding: tomorrow, he would do it again. Fail again. Learn again. And perhaps, inch by inch, reclaim what he had abandoned. Emma watched from the doorway for a moment, then turned back. Boundaries intact. Rage tempered. A quiet tension lingered in the apartment, thick as fog, reminding both of them, nothing would be easy, nothing would be immediate. Presence demanded sacrifice, and he had only just begun to pay. Morning arrived slowly in the small apartment. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains, catching the faint scent of baby lotion, detergent, and faint remnants of yesterday's burnt toast. Vincent woke with his jaw aching from clenching in sleep, shoulders stiff from the relentless tension of a week spent fumbling in a world without power or control. The children were awake before him. Their small voices echoed softly from the nursery. He could hear the rustle of blankets, the occasional coo, the sound of tiny hands patting at crib rails. Anxiety tightened in his chest. He was already late. Yesterday's failures lingered like shadows across his mind. He was not allowed mistakes today. Not again. Morning, he muttered to himself, dragging himself upright. Armani pajamas felt ridiculous against the soft cotton sheets, a relic of a life that had no relevance here. He swallowed the lump in his throat, reminding himself, presence mattered more than perfection. By 6:15, the first task began. Feeding. Vincent approached the nursery with measured steps, trying not to startle the children. The baby, slightly awake, blinked up at him with wide, uncertain eyes. He cradled the tiny body, the weight shockingly fragile. A bottle spilled in his hand, powdered milk dusting his shirt. He cursed softly under his breath, cheeks heating. Vincent, tilt the bottle, Emma's voice cut through the quiet, calm but firm. He adjusted, fumbling with the nipple, coaxing the child to drink. Half of the liquid ended on his arm, but he persisted. Persistence, not grace, was all he could offer. Breakfast followed in a blur. Eggs, toast, juice, scrambled formula bottles. Vincent juggled tasks, timing measured in frantic heartbeats. The older child demanded attention. Questions, tiny observations, needs he struggled to anticipate. Emma observed, hands occasionally hovering to correct, never interfering entirely. Every failure sharpened humility, every minor success built the slow bridge toward trust. Laundry became a ritualized war. He had memorized the detergent order, the folding techniques, the sorting of clothes. Each sock folded properly was a victory. Each onesie without mishap reinforced the notion that he could function in this world, however small the victories seemed against the vast empire he had left behind. By mid-morning, Vincent attempted a bonding ritual. He read from a children's book, voice cracking, pronunciation imperfect. The toddlers stared, first with confusion, then cautious engagement. The cow jumped over the moon, he read. Emphasis awkward, pacing wrong. The baby banged a tiny hand against his arm. A small giggle escaped. Vincent paused, heart hammering. A response, even tentative, was progress. Good job, Emma said quietly, glancing from the counter, measuring her words. They respond to effort, not polish. Lunch brought a new set of challenges. Sandwiches cut unevenly, juice spilled again, and Vincent's hands shook slightly from fatigue. The children's attention span demanded precision, patience, and timing. He dropped a plate. Silence fell. He froze. The baby wailed, the toddler squirmed. Emma intervened briefly, correcting placement of utensils, guiding tiny hands. "You're too fast," she said softly. "Slow down. Observe. Let them teach you too." Vincent exhaled, attempting a rhythm he had never known, one task at a time, not 100 simultaneously. Presence. Observation. Care. Lessons he had never learned in boardrooms, palaces, or empires, but now were crucial. Afternoon naps offered rare reprieve. Vincent sat by the window, tracing patterns in the sunlight, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the sleeping children. He allowed himself a moment to reflect. The guilt weighed heavily. He had abandoned them. The absence had been brutal, irreversible, and yet the opportunity for redemption existed here, now, in these mundane acts of care. Emma approached quietly, holding a stack of books. "You've improved," she said, voice neutral but soft. "Not perfect. But you're here. That counts." Vincent nodded, swallowing the lump of emotion threatening to escape. I want to be better. I have to be." She tilted her head, considering. "It's not about wanting. It's about doing, consistently, every day. Even when they cry. Even when you fail. Even when you're exhausted." He watched her leave the room, feeling the weight of her expectations. He was not allowed to falter. Every action mattered. Every moment of attention, every effort, was a thread weaving him back into a life he had abandoned. Evening arrived with a new trial, the first walk outside. The toddlers needed fresh air, but Vincent struggled with the double stroller. Streets were crowded, uneven. Cars honked. Pedestrians brushed past, indifferent. His grip on the stroller was tentative. Sweat pricked his brow. The children, sensing his tension, fussed. Emma walked beside him, calm, steady. "Breathe," she said. "They'll mirror your mood. If you panic, they panic. Be present, not perfect." Vincent exhaled slowly. The sun's golden light softened his edges. He focused on the children's small hands clutching the stroller bars, the rhythm of their breathing, the small milestone of movement without injury. A sense of achievement, fragile but tangible, bloomed. Humility was becoming routine. Presence, habit. Dinner that evening was quieter, less chaotic. Vincent managed the formula bottles, the high chairs, the baby food. Emma watched, occasionally correcting. He followed instructions carefully, the rhythm becoming familiar. Small gestures, a wiped mouth, a tucked-in blanket, a gentle pat, replaced authority. He was learning to wield influence differently, through care, patience, attentiveness. After the children slept, Vincent remained awake. He sat on the couch, staring at a photo on the wall, a captured moment of the first day he had seen them 4 weeks ago. The baby's tiny hands, the fragile smiles, the cautious gazes. He pressed a hand to his chest. Humility, effort, presence. These were the foundations he was laying. Failure still haunted him, but effort was his redemption. Days became weeks. Vincent's clumsy attempts gradually sharpened. Formula measured correctly, diapers changed without catastrophe, bedtime routines followed. Small connections emerged, a giggle when he read a book, a tentative reach for his hand, a babbled word barely forming. The children began to respond, not just tolerate. One morning, the toddler pointed at him, eyes bright. Dada. The word hung in the air, fragile, incomplete, yet unmistakable. Vincent froze, heart hammering. Emma's expression softened imperceptibly. She did not speak, did not interfere. He knelt, voice trembling. Did you just say that? The toddler repeated it more confidently, Dada. A laugh followed, spontaneous and genuine. Vincent's throat tightened. The power he had wielded over states, corporations, and millions could not compare to this. The acknowledgement, the connection, the fragile bridge of trust forming between father and child. Evening routines remained laborious, yet each task reinforced the bond. Bathing, feeding, reading, bedtime stories. All became a rhythm, a series of incremental victories, small yet cumulative. Emma's boundaries remained firm, but her presence less rigid, the subtle softening evident in glances, in measured patience rather than judgment. Vincent learned to anticipate needs, read subtle cues, respond with precision rather than command. Humility became second nature. Attachment, once abstract and distant, now bloomed in the small moments. A smile returned, a hand held, a laugh shared. By the end of the month, the apartment felt alive in a new way. Chaos persisted, but order existed within it, mediated by care and attention rather than dominance. Vincent had begun to understand that power was not coercion, that influence was not fear. Presence mattered. Effort mattered. Love mattered. Emma observed silently. The subtle tension remained, tempered by recognition of his progress. The children responded to him, cautiously, tentatively, but with increasing trust. The foundation was set. The first milestone achieved. The first word, a fragile yet undeniable signal that connection had begun. Vincent sat in the dim light that night, exhausted but alive in a way he had never known. Every failure, every minor triumph, every painstakingly earned moment of trust had reinforced the lesson. Transformation required persistence, humility, and vulnerability. He pressed a hand to his heart, whispering softly, "I'll keep trying. I'll never stop." And for the first time, presence felt like power. Vincent's newfound rhythm unraveled the moment the first message arrived. The phone vibrated softly on the kitchen counter while he prepared formula, tiny hands patting at his back. The screen displayed a number he didn't recognize. No name, no greeting. Just the cold text. "You've forgotten something. We're coming for what's yours." He froze, bottle in hand, formula nearly spilling over the edge. The toddler slaughter and cooing became background noise he barely registered. The phone dropped to the counter with a soft clatter. A chill ran down his spine. Head thought danger belonged to his past, contained in boardrooms, penthouses, and armored vehicles. But here it was, in this small apartment, in the guise of a simple, anonymous threat. Emma appeared behind him, a soft exhalation accompanying her gaze. "What is it?" she asked calmly, scanning the phone. Her voice carried authority, though the underlying tension betrayed her assessment of the situation. "Message. Threat. Not clear who," Vincent replied, muscles taut, hands gripping the counter. She leaned close, eyes narrowing. "Not clear means we treat it as urgent." By the afternoon, Vincent had activated his old network quietly, subtly. Contacts who had once managed boardrooms, private security, and the murky underworld he had left behind were now assets to protect this fragile, domestic world. Each call increased his anxiety, lives intertwined, stakes high, his power irrelevant in the sphere that mattered most. The safety of these children, these fragile bonds. Evening fell, and Vincent walked the children back from the park. Tiny hands clutched his, the rhythm of their steps grounding him. Yet with every shadowed alley, every parked SUV, every stranger's glance, he felt a pulse of fear sharpen in his chest. He had managed danger before with precision, but the variables were infinite here. Innocence made them vulnerable, the apartment thin-walled and exposed. At night, as he prepared bottles, the threat lingered. Emma, sitting cross-legged on the floor, meticulously arranging baby clothes, did not comment immediately. Her calm was unsettling. Silence had weight. Vincent's insomnia had returned, a specter from nights spent counting threats and strategies, this time not for profit, but for survival. "We can't assume they'll wait until you're asleep," she said finally, voice low. "They'll exploit the smallest weakness. Every routine, every predictable behavior, they'll map it." Vincent exhaled, heart pounding. "I've changed everything. I've been careful." Emma shook her head slightly. "Routine is visible. Predictable patterns are vulnerabilities. You cannot predict everything. And neither can I." Days passed in tense rhythms. Every delivery, every visitor, every pedestrian passing by became a potential threat. He had grown accustomed to managing empires with invisible hands, but this world demanded a different intelligence, hyper-awareness, patience, and adaptability. The mundane acts, laundry, feeding, walks, now carried the added weight of risk assessment. Then the first concrete breach occurred. A shadow lingered too long outside the nursery window. The blinds had been left slightly open. Vincent noticed it immediately, the instinct ingrained over decades. His heart pounded, sweat prickling his back. He grabbed a pair of binoculars, trained them on the street. A black sedan idled across the road, engine off, headlights dim. A man exited, observing. Fear replaced anger. There was no room for fury here. Fury was indulgent. Survival demanded focus. Every muscle tensed, every breath calculated. He called the security contact. 2 cars arrived, surveillance discreet, silent. The man noticed nothing, eventually retreating, but the signal was clear. Boundaries had been tested, patterns observed, vulnerabilities noted. Emma watched, expression inscrutable. "They're probing," she said. "They will come back. And they'll escalate." Vincent exhaled, tension coiling like a spring in his chest. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt exposed. Every door, every window, every entry point became a risk. Nights stretched, insomnia thickened. He walked the corridors, touching locks, checking windows, counting exits, recalculating plans he had thought foolproof. The children remained oblivious. Tiny giggles echoed from the nursery. Tiny hands clutched his fingers as he walked the hall. Each heartbeat a reminder of what was at stake. He could not fail. Not now. Not when the stakes were no longer abstract power, but real lives dependent on vigilance, presence, and instinct sharpened to a razor edge. Another morning, another warning. A package left on the doorstep, a small envelope, thick with menace. No signature, no return address. Inside, photographs of the children, smiling, unaware, oblivious. Vincent felt a sharp twist in his stomach. The threat had become tangible. They knew them. They knew their routines. They knew Vincent's neglect could be exploited. Emma's presence at his side, steady, grounded him. "We reinforce security," she said. "We adapt routines. We control the environment as much as possible. But always assume they are watching." Days became weeks, the tension a constant companion. Walks to the park became tactical, monitored. Windows locked, blinds adjusted, surveillance installed quietly. Vincent's domestic competence increased, but so did the stakes. Every misstep carried potential catastrophe. He had learned humility, now he learned fear, the kind that keeps one awake, alert, and trembling at every shadow. Then came the first direct encounter. The black sedan appeared once again, cruising slowly past the apartment. Vincent noticed from the living room window, heart hammering. Emma whispered, "They're testing response times." Patterns again. Vincent clenched his fists, jaw tight. Anger flickered, but fear dominated. One misstep could cost more than power, it could cost lives. He followed the car silently, observing its behavior, noting times, distances, and movements. This was no longer a game of influence, it was a game of survival. Night fell, and Vincent sat alone on the balcony after the children slept. The city lights glimmered, but the warm glow did not comfort. Shadows were everywhere. Threats invisible yet immediate. Insomnia returned fully, gnawing, pressing. Fear was now a constant companion, replacing the anger he had once carried like armor. And yet, he knew, this was the world he had brought them into. He had abandoned safety for love of control once, leaving wounds and vulnerabilities in his wake. Now, those vulnerabilities were exploited, tested, and ready to be struck. He pressed a hand to his chest, whispering in the night. "They're coming. I will protect them. No mistakes." The last page of the day closed with a shadow on the street corner, headlights cutting across pavement. Figures moved, unidentifiable yet deliberate. Vincent's breath caught. The threat had escalated. Danger was no longer distant, it was imminent. The children slept peacefully inside, unaware. He watched from the balcony, silent, tense, every muscle coiled, every sense heightened. Outside, the night whispered a warning. This is only the beginning. The night was thick with tension. Shadows stretched long across the narrow streets of the apartment complex. Vincent's senses were taut, every creak of the floorboards a warning. The children slept inside, oblivious to the danger that stalked them. He had reinforced every entry, installed cameras, coordinated with security, yet he could feel it, the predator closing in. This was no longer testing. This was execution. From the balcony, he scanned the street. The black sedan appeared again, engine off, parked diagonally across the road. Two men stepped out, moving silently, their figures shrouded in the dim glow of streetlights. One carried a case, the other a small device he didn't recognize at first. Observation told him it was tactical, precise, planned. Emma stood behind him, silent, calm, but Vincent felt the tension in her shoulders. She had already called the backup. "They're coming for a window. The toddler's room is exposed from the side alley," she whispered. Vincent's mind raced. Every option, every possible mistake, every angle of escape for the children ran through his head. The apartment layout, every narrow corridor, every door. He had memorized them, yet the adrenaline made him second-guess every step. Suddenly, the power cut. Lights flickered and went out. Darkness filled the room. Panic surged briefly, but he controlled it. He had prepared for this. Motion sensors triggered a silent alarm. Emma's voice, steady and low, guided him. "Lock the children in the inner room. Now." He moved swiftly, whispering instructions. Tiny hands clutched at his trousers. "Daddy, what's happening?" One child whispered, voice trembling. "Shoo, it's okay. Stay here." "I won't let anyone hurt you," he murmured, lifting the toddler into his arms. The weight grounded him, focused him, reminded him what was at stake. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Metallic clicks. The intruders were inside. This was no drill. This was real. Fear pressed against his chest, but anger flared behind it. No longer abstract, the danger was intimate, personal, and immediate. Vincent's training took over. He guided Emma and the children into the inner room, securing the door with a reinforced lock. "Stay quiet. Don't move," he ordered. He moved to confront the intruders, heart pounding. The first figure appeared at the stairwell entrance, masked, silent, weapon raised. Vincent's hand hovered near his own concealed firearm, a split-second calculation before action. The hallway erupted in chaos. Shots fired. Shouts. Metallic clangs of improvised barriers. Vincent moved with precision, adrenaline sharpening every thought, every muscle. Yet fear never left him, it anchored him to the stakes. Children, Emma, the fragile trust he had begun to build. One intruder dove toward the inner room, weapon raised. Vincent tackled him, the struggle tight, exhausting, raw. Emma screamed from behind the locked door, a sound of panic that sharpened his focus. He subdued the man, pressed a hand over his mouth, dragging him back toward the exit. Another shadow appeared. Vincent fired. The man dropped, but Vincent knew it wasn't over. Patterns had been tested. They would adapt. He had seconds to act. Then the unthinkable, an explosion of glass from the side window. The device from earlier had shattered the barrier. The children were exposed. Heart hammering, Vincent dove forward, pushing the nearest toddler out of harm's way. Glass cut his arm, blood warm and sticky against his skin. Pain, fear, anger, emotions collided, grounding him, sharpening him. Emma's voice cut through the chaos. "Vincent. Behind you." He turned just in time to see a man advancing, weapon raised. Instinct overrode thought. He pushed, tackled, struggled. Adrenaline roared. He could feel the weight of every second, every breath. One misstep, one hesitation, and the children, his most vulnerable responsibility, would be lost. A sharp pain exploded in his side. He staggered, warmth spreading across his shirt. One intruder had anticipated his movement, struck him. Yet he remained upright, driven by a singular clarity: sacrifice. His body ached, every nerve screaming, but he could not falter. Emma rushed forward, restraining another assailant, but Vincent motioned her back. "Go. The children, get them out." His voice, hoarse, commanding, carried authority born of desperation. The inner door slammed. The children were safe for now, hidden, protected. Vincent turned to face the final figure, a familiar presence, a lieutenant turned betrayer, a man who had orchestrated their separation. Rage and disbelief collided. "You?" Vincent spat, pain lancing his side. "You set this up?" The man smiled, cold and precise. "Orders are orders. You left us no choice. You thought you could disappear. Thought your power would protect them. But power isn't enough. Love, sacrifice, that's your weakness." Vincent's chest heaved. The words, the betrayal, the stakes, it all crystallized. His only option: draw the attention, lure the threat, survive just long enough for the children to escape. Every strategy, every skill honed over decades, funneled into this single, violent moment. A flash. Movement. Gunfire. Vincent advanced, absorbing blows, disarming, redirecting. His vision blurred with blood and adrenaline, but he was conscious, present, fully alive in this crucible. Each step brought him closer to the intruder's leader. Emma's voice, calm despite panic, reminded him, "Vincent, protect them." He nodded, internalizing the simplicity of that command. There was no victory here without their safety. Every hit, every maneuver, every ounce of power was now a tool for shielding those he loved. A window of opportunity opened, the leader exposed. Vincent lunged, disarmed, restrained. But a surge of reinforcements approached. He knew the outcome of prolonged engagement: capture or death. He had minutes to make the ultimate choice. The children's muffled cries from the inner room echoed. Time slowed. Vincent's mind raced: surrender and risk harm to them, or create a diversion, taking the full brunt himself, giving Emma and the children a chance. Choice crystallized. Sacrifice was inevitable. He could not allow fear to dictate survival at their expense. He moved, drawing attention, firing, creating chaos. He felt blows land, felt pain spike across his torso, but kept moving, shielded by sheer will and purpose. Every action funneled toward one outcome: the children's escape. Finally, as the intruders were momentarily disoriented, Vincent grabbed a flare of adrenaline, signaling Emma. She moved swiftly, guiding the children down a pre-planned escape route, leading them out to safety. He turned back, facing the remaining threat, body battered, every sense screaming. The betrayer advanced, gun raised. Vincent's eyes, sharp and defiant despite pain, met his. No words left. Only choice. Only action. The chapter closes as the first decisive blow lands. Vincent's sacrifice is imminent. Pain, fear, rage, love, intertwined in the moment before everything changes. The children's safety has been secured, but at what cost? Outside, sirens wail faintly in the distance, approaching, delayed. Inside, Vincent's world narrows to a single point: survival of those he loves, at the expense of his own body and freedom. The ambulance's siren tore through the night like a scream, a shrill reminder that seconds now measured life itself. Vincent's body was a furnace of pain, every pulse of his heart a drum of urgency. Blood soaked through his designer shirt, armani threads now indistinguishable from crimson. He tried to speak, tried to assure, but the words came out as ragged gasps. Emma gripped his hand with white-knuckled desperation, ignoring the sterile cold of the hospital gurney wheels. "Stay with me. Stay with me." Her voice was steady only in the absolute terror behind it. She had no time to calculate, she had no armor left. The city outside blurred past. Streetlights in Maryland flickered against the rainy night, reflections dancing off puddles like fractured diamonds. In her mind, Emma mapped every option, every scenario. Massachusetts, New Jersey, Hawaii, California. The states their wealth could have shielded them in, the places where money might have bought safety, yet here, in this small emergency room in a city unprepared for their chaos, it was useless. Vincent's grip loosened. His chest rose shallowly, uneven. The paramedic's voice was clipped, urgent. Multiple entry wound. Femoral. Hemorrhaging. Airway compromised. Words like equations, precise, clinical, but meaningless to Emma. All that mattered was him, alive. The ER doors slammed, fluorescent lights slicing the dark into sterile rectangles. Nurses moved like choreographed shadows. Vincent's body jerked with every step, every movement a gamble. The scent of antiseptic mixed with the metallic tang of blood, a nauseating perfume she would never forget. "They're going to lose him," she whispered, voice breaking. "I can't, he can't." She stopped herself. Words were fragile, inadequate. The truth was unbearable. The man who had dominated rooms, who had orchestrated empires and bent people to his will, was now entirely powerless. The surgeons took him swiftly. The waiting room became a vacuum of dread. Emma sat, children sleeping in borrowed cribs beside her, unaware of the gravity. Hours stretched like centuries. 6 long hours. She stared at her hands, shaking, calculating every possible outcome. Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Hawaii, California. Names looping in her mind, reminders of everything that could have been. Their wealth, their power, yet none of it could guard against a bullet that had grazed his heart by mere centimeters. A father's prayers might have been sufficient. But Emma had stopped believing months ago. Yet now, with the machines humming somewhere behind locked doors, she whispered words she hadn't thought she'd utter. "God. Help him. Keep him alive, please. I know I haven't prayed in years. But I'll start. Please, just this once." Minutes crawled. The children murmured in sleep. The soft rise and fall of their chests a cruel reminder of what hung in the balance. Emma's hands clenched, unclenched. The silence screamed louder than any threat they had faced outside these walls. Then came the first false moment. The surgeon emerged, face impassive. Emma rushed forward. "How is he? Tell me." "We did everything we could." The words hung, heavy, final. Her chest tightened. The room went cold. The children stirred, sensing her despair. Tears fell unbidden. Emma's knees buckled. She could not breathe. Vincent, the invincible, was gone. Her heart shattered into jagged pieces, each shard sharp, irreversible. Then, almost mockingly, the surgeon continued. "And he made it. He's stable. He's in ICU. We expect him to wake." Relief crashed over her like waves over cliffs. Every muscle in her body trembled. She sank to the floor, tears streaming, sobs unrestrained. Her hands shook violently, the weight of fear, love, and guilt coiling into one uncontrollable knot. The ICU was a different world. Machines beeped softly, a mechanical heartbeat syncing with Vincent's own. Tubes, monitors, lines. He looked like a sculpture of vulnerability, yet somehow profoundly alive. His chest rose slowly. A ragged cough, a flutter of eyelids. Vincent's first words were raspy, almost incomprehensible. "You, idiot." Emma laughed through tears, voice choked. "I'm your idiot," she whispered. The moment stretched, fragile and eternal. No history, no betrayal, only raw, unvarnished connection. The children pressed their tiny hands against the glass partition. One murmured, "Daddy," and Vincent's fingers twitched, reaching, faltering, longing. He was still himself, yet everything had shifted. Power meant nothing here. Vulnerability was absolute. Hours passed in agonizing stillness. Emma did not leave. She whispered stories, memories, nonsense to keep him tethered. The bullet that had grazed his heart was a cruel reminder of how fragile control was, how delicate the balance between life and death. She thought of the places they could have run: Massachusetts, New Jersey, Maryland, Hawaii, California. but there was no escape from what had truly mattered. Love. Sacrifice. Presence. Being there when it mattered, no matter the cost. By nightfall, Vincent's eyes opened fully. Recognition, confusion, relief, all in one flash. Emma took his hand. "You're here. You're alive," she said softly. He squeezed hers weakly, voice cracking. I thought I left too much behind. Thought I'd never see you again. You didn't. You're here. And you're mine, in this moment. That's all that matters," she replied. The children watched, wide-eyed, innocent yet anchoring them both to the present. Every hour, every machine, every flutter of breath reinforced what they had risked, what had been lost, and what had been saved. The luxury of their old life, riches sprawled across New Jersey or California, meant nothing compared to this fragile, trembling, absolute reality. Vincent's hand trembled against hers, the tremor not from weakness but from the weight of everything that had transpired. No amount of power, no empire, could protect against what mattered most. He realized fully that night, life, love, sacrifice, presence, these were the currencies that could not be bought, only earned, only proven. The day ends with Vincent drifting into a shallow sleep, connected to machines but tethered by Emma's hand, the children asleep nearby, and the unspoken promise of recovery. The false death had broken them, relief had sewn them together. The ICU door closed behind Emma with a quiet click, sealing her in a corridor thick with antiseptic and echoes. Vincent's steady breathing came from the bed she'd been beside for hours, a fragile rhythm that seemed almost miraculous. The adrenaline that had kept her upright during the ambulance ride and the surgery drained from her body, leaving her hollow, trembling, yet grateful. The bullet had grazed his heart by mere centimeters. The surgeon's words replayed endlessly in her mind. He made it. He's stable. Stability felt miraculous after hours spent dangling over the abyss, yet the relief brought a new awareness. Life would be different now, irrevocably changed. The power, the opulence, the control, they had no relevance here. What mattered was simple, primal, terrifying, presence. Emma pulled the children closer, their small bodies warm against hers, trusting and unaware of the depth of danger that had just passed. Each soft breath, each sigh, a reminder of the stakes. Vincent, even in sedation, had drawn her entire focus. He had always dominated rooms, controlled empires, and bent people to his will. But now, utterly helpless, he had taught her a lesson no boardroom, no negotiation, no luxury could. Weeks passed in a blur of monitors, medications, and painstakingly gentle caregiving. Vincent's recovery was deliberate, methodical, like a sculpture slowly revealing its form under a patient hand. He could not move without assistance. Every effort, sitting up, drinking, even breathing unassisted, required guidance. Emma became the caretaker, the navigator of his fragile body and raw emotions. The luxury of their old life contrasted sharply with the struggle of recovery. The Rolls-Royce Phantom sat untouched outside the hospital, a symbol of power rendered meaningless in the sterile, fluorescent-lit wards. Designer suits were swapped for hospital gowns, boardroom meetings replaced by feeding schedules and diaper changes. Every shift of perspective reminded Vincent that dominance was useless here, that humility and vulnerability were the only currencies that mattered. "Don't push yourself," Emma said softly one morning, adjusting the 4-line in his arm. "You're healing. That's all that matters." "I'm trying," he muttered, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The words felt foreign, heavy with admission. He had been a man who dictated terms. Now he learned to obey instructions, to trust the care of someone he had once thought beneath his notice. The children visited daily, their presence bridges between the past and the fragile present. Tiny hands reached for him, their voices simple but full of wonder. "Daddy up?" "Look, Daddy." Vincent responded with tentative smiles, shaky fingers brushing hair or fingertips against small palms. Every connection built trust, every shared laugh, however faint, stitched him back into life. Therapy became part of the routine, both as a precaution and as a bridge for emotional processing. The counselor emphasized patience, gradual rebuilding, and acknowledgement of trauma. Vincent attended reluctantly at first, rigid in posture, wary of exposing vulnerability. Emma observed silently from the waiting area, letting him take the first tentative steps toward understanding that power could not shield him from pain, but reflection could build resilience. Nighttime brought new challenges. Vincent often woke from nightmares, murmuring fragments of fear and loss. Emma held him, soothing, repeating simple reassurances. "You're here. I'm here. You're safe." His hands clutched hers, desperate and uncoordinated, trembling with the release of long-suppressed tension. These moments, raw and unguarded, became the axis around which their tentative reconnection spun. Gradually, the dynamic shifted. Vincent accepted guidance in the smallest acts, medication schedules, physical therapy, even dietary restrictions. His old self, commanding and unyielding, had to yield to the rhythm of healing. Each small victory, each hour of patience, became a lesson in humility. Emma's steady presence, unwavering and non-judgmental, reinforced the power of care and consistency. One evening, as the children slept in a borrowed nursery corner, Vincent spoke in a low, unsteady voice. "I never knew how much I relied on being in control." He paused, swallowing hard. "Not just business, life. You made me see that I can't do everything alone." Emma reached across the hospital bed, letting her hand rest on his. "We all need someone. Even the strongest people. Even you." Her eyes softened, holding the quiet truth. Strength wasn't about invulnerability, it was about presence, patience, and shared burdens. Time passed in measured increments, days blending into weeks. Vincent's mobility improved, the trauma scars visible but not defining. Their conversations, once clipped or tense, deepened. He began to share fragments of his past. Childhood wounds, fears unspoken, regrets carried silently. Emma listened, offering understanding without rushing forgiveness. Their words circled each other, hesitant yet intimate, probing for connection while respecting boundaries. "You're trying," she said softly one night, holding his gaze across the hospital room. "That's enough for now." He smiled faintly, lips quivering. "I'll wait. As long as it takes, I promise." Their moments were punctuated by the children's milestones. First words, tentative laughter, the smallest achievements that marked the passing of time. Vincent's tears at a simple utterance of his name by his daughter were unguarded and raw. He had once controlled empires. Now he found triumph in a tiny human voice, a sound wholly dependent on him, yet entirely innocent. Each day reinforced lessons hard-learned. Power without humility was meaningless. Love demanded presence and sacrifice. Vulnerability was not weakness but proof of strength. The walls Vincent had built around himself, once impenetrable, began to crumble. Not through confrontation or threat, but through steady, patient care and shared humanity. By the end of the chapter, the transformation was subtle but undeniable. Vincent no longer clung to the symbols of wealth that had defined him. He no longer measured success by domination or fear. He measured it by moments. Soft glances, laughter shared, the warmth of hands held in silence. Emma, once a figure of authority and mistrust, became the axis of his new reality, a partner, a witness, a reminder of the value of care over command. The hospital room, once a chamber of terror and suspense, became a space of cautious hope. Machines still beeped softly, monitors still recorded vital signs, but the tension had lifted. Where fear had once ruled, patience and connection began to take root. Vincent's eyes, when they met Emma's, carried understanding, respect, and a fledgling humility. A stark contrast to the man who had entered the hospital 6 weeks prior, bullet wound and ego in equal measure. Recovery, they both realized, was not just physical. It was emotional, relational, and painfully gradual. Yet every small step, every word, every held hand was proof that transformation was possible, and that the story of survival could evolve into a story of redemption, love, and cautious reconnection. Final episode. 6 months had passed since Vincent left the sterile fluorescent halls of the ICU behind. The family had moved to a quiet suburban street, far from the threats, the chaos, and the shadowed corridors of power that had defined Vincent's former life. The house was modest, not an estate, not a symbol of conquest but warm, lived in, and full of laughter. The children ran barefoot on the freshly mowed lawn, the kind of joy that could not be purchased. Vincent pushed the swing gently for his youngest, the late afternoon sun catching the fine lines on his face, the scars from bullets and decisions past softened by months of patience and care. Emma sat on the porch, camera in hand, documenting these ordinary moments, capturing the fleeting beauty of quiet life. The giggles of a toddler, the scrape of knees on concrete, the hesitant smile of a child learning to climb. The luxury cars, the Armani suits, the meetings in penthouses overlooking the richest states, California, Texas, New York, Florida, and Illinois, were all absent here. They had traded prestige for presence, and Vincent could feel the shift in his chest, a lightness he had not known in years. Power was no longer a measure, love, care, and ordinary days were. Children's laughter became their rhythm. The eldest son, whose first words had been Vincent's name during recovery, now ran ahead calling "Daddy, look," while the twins tumbled into the grass. Emma's gaze lingered on Vincent, seeing the man he had become, not the untouchable figure from headlines or crime reports, but a father, a partner, a man learning humility and joy daily. Inside, the house smelled of fresh bread and coffee, an ordinary combination that felt luxurious in its simplicity. Vincent cooked alongside Emma, fumbling with ingredients, dropping a whisk or spilling flour, the domestic failures of a man unaccustomed to such tasks. Emma laughed, genuine and unrestrained, and Vincent couldn't help but join. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same bowl, fingers tangling in the most ordinary yet intimate touch imaginable. Night fell, painting the suburban rooftops in deep blue, and the children were tucked into bed. Emma and Vincent lingered in the living room, the soft glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across furniture that was lived in, not ornamental. Vincent turned to Emma, his hands slightly trembling. Not from fear but anticipation. "I've thought about this for a long time," he said quietly, voice low and earnest. "Every milestone we've shared, every ordinary moment. I want all of it to continue. I don't need a grand gesture, a penthouse, a headline. I need us. I need you." Emma blinked, her heart skipping in a rhythm she remembered from days of fear and adrenaline, now replaced with hope and tenderness. "Vincent." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a simple ring, engraved with the children's names, a quiet promise, a symbol of what truly mattered. "I want to choose us every day. Would you marry me?" Tears formed in Emma's eyes. She nodded, words catching in her throat. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, we'll do this. Together." The ring was neither enormous nor flashy. It was perfect because it represented the ordinary, enduring love they had rebuilt. It carried the weight of months spent in vigilance, fear, care, sacrifice, and quiet laughter. It marked the future, a forward-looking symbol of what had been earned, not given. The next weeks settled into a rhythm of domestic bliss, gentle and intentional. The children thrived in the secure, ordinary environment, learning the joy of small victories and the stability of routine. The eldest mastered his tricycle, the twins began forming sentences with increasing clarity, and Vincent found himself celebrating moments he had once considered trivial. Each day was a lesson in gratitude, patience, and presence. Emma and Vincent carved out nightly conversations on the porch, soft laughter punctuating reflections on past mistakes, missed chances, and the subtle victories of daily life. The air carried the scent of jasmine from the garden, a quiet reminder that life could be beautiful without spectacle. One evening, as the children slept, Emma turned to Vincent, holding his hand gently. "Impregnant," she said, the words spilling into the quiet room, a symbol of new life and forward momentum. Vincent's eyes widened, then softened, a slow smile spreading across his face. "We won't miss this one," he whispered, a quiet promise to the future they would share from day one. The weight of past failures melted slightly in that moment, replaced by cautious joy and anticipation. Days became months. The suburban streets, once unfamiliar and mundane, became home. Parks, grocery runs, bedtime stories. They were no longer routines but celebrations of presence. No one knew the shadowed pasts they carried, the danger they had survived, or the sacrifices that had been made. And in that anonymity, they found victory. Vincent often thought about the power he had once wielded: California boardrooms, Texas oil contracts, New York skyscrapers, Florida resorts, Illinois estates, and realized he had never felt influence like this. The quiet, unremarkable power of a family thriving because love, care, and presence were prioritized over fear and dominance. The proposal and pregnancy became touchstones of the ordinary magic they had built, symbols of forward momentum and earned happiness. No dramatic battles, no headlines, no grandiose gestures. Only the enduring strength of shared life, rebuilt trust, and the peace of ordinary existence. The final day of the chapter finds them at the park, the children running ahead with unrestrained joy. Vincent sits on the swing, pushing them gently, Emma capturing each moment with her camera. She pauses, looking at him, seeing the man who had survived bullets, betrayal and ego, now softened by humility, care and love. "You're different now," she says softly. "I am," he replies, eyes on the children. "And I've never been happier." The camera captures the moment, but the memory surpasses the image. The ordinary, unseen moments, the small touches, laughter, bedtime stories, gentle reassurances, are their true victories. No one knows their past, no one will judge the scars, the sacrifices, the battles endured. In anonymity, they have conquered everything that once seemed insurmountable. As they leave the park, hands held, laughter echoing, and sunlight fading, Vincent glances at Emma, whispering, "We'll figure it out always." She smiles, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I'll wait as long as it takes." And in that ordinary, unremarkable moment, peace is complete. Not fantasy, not perfection, but real, earned, ordinary happiness, the ultimate victory. If this story of transformation and second chances moved you, share it with someone who believes love conquers all. Comment below your favorite moment of Vincent and Emma's journey, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories where ordinary life becomes extraordinary.